Hi, everyone, and welcome to Impact Lunch with Norrsken Foundation. I'm lucky to have with me the CEO of Norrsken Foundation, Erik Engellau-Nilsson, and Harini Annadanam, and welcome, management trainee, to Impact. So, for this conversation, we'll dig down into the Norrsken Foundation, why you exist, and the ways of how you're driving impact. So I'll give it over to you, Erik, to introduce.
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Erik. So Niklas, who founded Norrsken, and I used to work for this payments company called Klarna. And while we were there, we were thinking quite a lot, like maybe there's something that we've learned there, something from the experience of building a fast-growing tech company that we can apply to solving real problems that actually matter in the world, instead of just making e-commerce run a little bit smoother. And we thought a lot about that, and then iteratively tried out different things. And we ended up at a conclusion that what we can do best is to support impact entrepreneurs who are solving the world's greatest challenges. So that's what the idea of Norrsken is. But everyone has their own perspective on why joining Norrsken. So I thought it would be interesting to bring Harini as well. And maybe you can share your story, Harini.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Erik. So I'm Harini, and I'm quite a junior member of the team, but I definitely then have a perspective on what it's like to join an existing Norrsken team. And I think for me, I've always been interested in social impact and international development. And I clearly, from my voice, you can tell that I grew up in the UK. And I don't know what it's like to grow up in Sweden, but in the UK, we have a pretty established charity sector. So for me, growing up, I thought that social impact meant charity. And then I went to university and I studied economics. And then that opened up the possibility that social impact means policy making and policy interventions. But it was only really when I found Norrsken in Sweden that I realized that there was a new model. There was another model of social impact, which is tech entrepreneurship. And I'm a very strong believer in all of these different actors and cross-sector collaboration. But I think what really appealed to me about the model of tech entrepreneurship for impact is there's so much scalability potential in it. And now I think one thing that we say at Norrsken a lot is that as the world becomes more and more globalized, problems are becoming wider. They face the same problems are facing a huge number of people, and problems are more globalized. So solutions need to be more globalized too. And I think then that the tech aspect allows us to create these scalable solutions, but also sustainable. Because having profitable impact businesses means that they can be self-sustaining, which basically means that impact is limitless. So to me, that was incredibly inspiring. So I think that's what attracted me to Norrsken. But then beyond that, I think at Norrsken specifically, the focus is not only on advocating the model, but also on lifting the specific entrepreneurs who are doing this work. And I thought that being that champion was a really worthy thing.
Cool, thank you. I think what's really interesting is the shift we're talking about now, where we're used to looking at social entrepreneurship, which might be happening in the micro, be a franchise, it might be a community of some entrepreneurs going out in a village and creating a locally produced product of some sort. And I think what you're also touching upon is the opportunity with the global problems and using technology to go from that localized social entrepreneurship to a more global facing tech entrepreneurship for impact. And that's also why I think it's interesting the way you're thinking. And when we discuss this also, it's about having your roots in Sweden, but also thinking in a global way. So how are you thinking about how to scale your impact globally?
Interesting. So, and just a caveat, I think what we're doing is one thing that can solve a lot of big problems, but it's only complementary to a lot of other things. So this alone will never be the one final solution to all impact problems. But we're very much based on a philosophy called effective altruism. So we think a lot about how we can make every invested dollar as effectively used as possible. So where can we make the maximum impact? And for us, we started out in Stockholm because it was easier. So even though the impact here might be slightly less than in other places of the world, it's easier for us to be successful. And now when we've established ourselves here, we're thinking a lot about the next step. And that's why we're so excited about going to East Africa and setting up a similar ecosystem in Kigali, in Rwanda. So that's our next step. And we're looking at a lot of other cities in parallel too. But I think for us, since we've never done business in Rwanda before, that's a very challenging next step. So we'll take a lot of time and effort. That's what we're focused on right now.
But is that also a tip you would give others who are starting their organizations for driving impact, to sort of start where you know the market and then sort of refine your method? Will you use the same method as you're doing in Sweden that you will bring to Rwanda?
I think the problems the problems are slightly different in Rwanda and Sweden. So we will have to be very we have to listen in quite closely to what the needs are there more specifically. But in general, we would say that in Sweden, we're more focused on what we call impact entrepreneurship. In Rwanda, it's more focused on building the foundations for entrepreneurship in general. So, if you create a job there, you create impact because you're able to provide for your family members or for your community, or you become part of the sustainable economical growth there. So just building the infrastructure for entrepreneurship is more our focus, whereas in Sweden, it's more impact entrepreneurship.
Thanks. And you're actually going to Rwanda, Harini.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll be going to Rwanda, hopefully, as long as the effects of Corona, permit, early at the beginning of 2021, with the idea both of, we're going with a team from the Stockholm office, since, as Erik mentioned, we've really built up who we are and what we are in Stockholm. So the aim is to take that to Rwanda, but then work with the local team there to integrate our best practices from Stockholm into the local culture and really then blend the best of the two to create something like Norrsken, exactly like Norrsken, but fitting to the local context in Rwanda.
Cool.
And maybe, Celia, just one thing, since I don't think a lot of people actually know what Norrsken is, I can just say that we basically do three things. So one thing is that we've created this ecosystem for impact entrepreneurship. So I'm sitting in our hub here in Stockholm. There's 130 companies usually, not in Corona times, but usually there's 130 companies here that are all solving to solve societal or environmental problems with their businesses. So that's one part of Norrsken. The other is that we invest in these companies as well, not only in the companies that sit here in the house, but globally. So we've done close to 25 investments now, and we've raised, I think, the biggest impact early stage VC fund in Europe, so 100 million euros. And then the third thing we do is that we drive crazy initiatives with super high risk, but also very high impact if they're successful, and where we feel that we are well suited to maybe be successful just because we can bring in different partners and we can leverage our experience from technology. So those are the three things that make up Norrsken, basically.
Do you have an example of a crazy initiative you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Harini, maybe you want to share something about Action Against Corona.
Sure. So we are currently still in the process of working on an initiative called Action Against Corona, which is, of course, to deal with some of the effects of the coronavirus situation. And how it came about is that actually just over 2 months ago now, we were actually one of the early actors in Sweden. Decision that as a business, we'd ask the entire team to work from home until it's safe again to sit together as a team. So that was about 2 months ago now, but that was when we started off focusing internally, but then very quickly we switched that focus to looking at a more outward-facing perspective. And we realized that there were a huge number of startups and initiatives actually working on solutions to the coronavirus, whether directly on the healthcare implications or on other effects like social isolation. And some of those startups were actually within our own Norrsken community in Stockholm. So it just made a lot of sense for us to realize that we have a special position, that we have a great network of amazing partners and actors, and to be able to bring those together and leverage them to provide support to these entrepreneurs who are working as fast as they can to get these solutions out there. So we dropped everything, actually. And we our aim was to set aside 48 hours to sprint on something that we could work on that would enable us to support these entrepreneurs. And we actually exceeded our own expectations. And we created a platform with the help of partners called Action Against Corona within 30 hours instead. And it's essentially a light version of everything that Norrsken is about, which Erik already mentioned. But our aim is to help entrepreneurs get increased access to capital, talent, resources, and then to highlight their efforts. So we're basically doing a light version of that through Action Against Corona for the startups and initiatives working on the coronavirus. And so to that end, then we put out a call for applications for investment. We also set up a volunteer portal where volunteers can help the startups working on these solutions. And then we also brought on board partners who could provide pro bono or discounted services to these initiatives. And we've actually had amazing successes. It's been really, really humbling, actually. But we had our call for initiatives open for investment for a month. And we had over 1,000 applications within that time from 80 different countries. So it's been very global. And we've also had over 130 partners sign up to offer support, either through pro bono or heavily discounted services. So it's been incredible. And we've seen a number of great initiatives that we've actually been able to help. One of them is ABC Labs, which I think maybe Erik, maybe you could say a word or two about.
Yeah, sure. Sure. One of the things we realized is, I mean, first of all, we were complete beginners. We didn't know anything about pandemics or the coronavirus before. One of the things we learned from interacting with all these incredible companies is that testing is so crucial, both to get the economy going again, but also to save direct lives. So one of the things we've done is set up a lab now at the university hospital here in Stockholm, where we can massively scale up the highest quality testing for the general population here in Sweden first, and then this will become a pandemic center for Europe, both for PCR testing and for antibody testing. And what we did was basically just initially commit the capital ourselves entirely, but then as we sort of moved along, brought on board other investors and helped build the team, and now the organization running this is fantastic. And we're starting our first antibody testing on Friday. But it's super meaningful, deep impact, and there's an underlying business model there as well that would make this sustainable over time.
Yeah, I think what you're mentioning here is being sort of the one to kick it off. And I think we're in this era of discussing catalytic capital, the ones that are willing to put the capital there to get things to happen and get things rolling. And I know also MacArthur Foundation will also address catalytic capital later on today in the program, but it's really this sense of being daring and bold enough to sort of take that role. And I think that is one of the ways I think Norrsken Foundation is very inspiring to others in being bold enough, like you say, in 30 hours, putting the platform and the capital there for getting things to move.
And we're also in a slightly luxurious position of having a foundation where we have our own capital. We don't have to answer to any equity holders or anything like that. So we can, in a heartbeat, essentially drop everything that we're doing, as Harini described, and just focus the entire team on just getting one thing up and running, because we think that right now is the most important thing in the world to get going and where we can add the most impact. And then it's quite an easy decision to actually commit capital to that as well. When you see that the platform works, when you see the incredible inflow of entrepreneurs and companies and foundations that are from all over the world focusing on solving these problems. So we are in a slightly luxurious position in that way, that we are a foundation. We only have our own capital, and we can commit that when we feel we can do a lot of impact.
And I think the interesting sort of backdrop to that is when you're committing capital to driving impact, there's always an alternative way of driving impact, right? So how do you have any methods for how do you make the decision, we're going to do this and not that? Have you sort of...
Yeah, that is the easier. It's almost embarrassing to say how simple it is, but it's two axes. One axis is how much impact will this initiative have if it's successful. The other is how easy is it for us to be successful with this initiative. I think a lot of impact companies and initiatives fall into the trap of only looking at what's the potential outcome of this if it's successful, but forget about the operational part of it and how easy is it, how well equipped are we to be successful. So that's also why we started out in Sweden. Relatively low impact, but easier on the axis of how easy is it for us to be successful. So we judge everything based on that. Is there a likelihood of us being successful, and what's the impact? So impact times success likelihood, basically. But then afterwards, we measure the impact very carefully as well. And that's one of the things that Harini is driving here at Norrsken.
I think it would be very interesting for you to sort of also explain a little bit about how you go about measuring the impact.
Yeah, Harini. Perfect.
Sure, absolutely. So I think the first thing to say is that that there are a huge number of frameworks and models out there for how to measure impact. But the one thing to bear in mind is that a lot of these are designed for quite late stage actors, and often not for startups or businesses at all. So the first thing that we do is try and scale it back to what is easy and what is accessible for startups to measure. But then we follow a framework from the Impact Management Project, which is this great nonprofit organization from the UK. And they have a framework on how to measure impact that goes across 5 different dimensions. So for every project, you look at the what. So what is the outcome of this project? How much? So that's like when we talked about scalability, or you can talk about depth. So of course, what's great about tech entrepreneurship is that usually tech products have the scalability, but then there's also the depth factor to consider as well. And then there's who. So who are the beneficiaries? And that also goes slightly into what Erik was saying. I mean, when we talk about Sweden being low impact, that's mostly because the people in Sweden, if we're looking at people in Sweden, are usually better off than people in other parts of the world, for instance, or in other parts of society. So then the who is important. And then finally, there's also the contribution of this. So what else is happening if this project wasn't in place? What would happen otherwise? And I think that that's something that's been very relevant for us when looking at the solutions coming in addressing the coronavirus as well. What would happen without this solution available in the marketplace? And then lastly is the risk. So are there any unforeseen consequences of this solution? So that's a very simple framework, but it's actually incredibly useful. And there are obviously details within each of those that we delve into, but that's the basic outline. And it's pretty useful not only to look at companies, but it's also just useful to look at projects that companies themselves do. So it's incredibly useful.
No, I think it's a great report that or the impact management project that you're referring to. We also use that as a basis for how we screen companies that we invested in Catapult. And I think one of the also interesting thing is looking at, can this company grow without growing its impact, so that we know that it's very integral to what they do. And the other thing is, like you were touching on, Erik, is how can you be the convener, building a platform and have partners coming in to actually make something happen. And I think that's also what we want to offer you with being part of the Catapult community, is actually asking the community or giving ways for them to help you in driving your impact globally. So I know you will.
Right, and that kind of support depends a little bit on who you are and what you do, because in general we believe that people should do what they're great at. So if you're an accountant, then the best way to drive impact is actually to provide accounting to impact startups or foundations or charities. And Norrsken is just a super tiny drop in the ocean. So any success that we've had is purely based on the network effects of our partners. But Harini, maybe to be more concrete, give some examples of what partners could support with, both in terms of Corona and in terms of Rwanda.
Sure. So I think one thing to mention is that, in times of Corona, we've seen that there are these huge number of great actors working on offering their solutions to support humanity. And as I already mentioned, through Action Against Corona, it's been so humbling to see different actors from different spheres and sectors of the world come together to support each other. So if you are someone who can provide pro bono or discounted services to these initiatives working on these solutions, then please, we'd love to encourage you to do that, whether that's through services, through capital, or purely through highlighting the efforts of these initiatives, because the more traction they get, the more they're able to impact people. And then in terms of Rwanda, I think, it would be I think we're always, as Erik mentioned, we've had amazing success in Stockholm through the partners that we work with. And we would love to engage with similar partners in Rwanda as well. So if you have a network in Kigali and would like to support impact entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship in general, then we would love to get in touch. So open up each other's networks in that way. But also to highlight great startups coming out of East Africa, because there are amazing entrepreneurs doing work there already, and we're just going to dip our toes in and try and find them and help them in any way that we can. But they're the ones doing the work. So if you already know of some, then please do highlight them.
Yeah, and in general, I think the work of Norrsken has this. We're trying to answer a question of like, why are we celebrating in society today Instagram stars, sports stars? We're highlighting the effort of YouTube celebrities more than people who are actually solving real fundamental problems and are helping developing, the planet or people. And I internally joke often that I won't give up or I won't finish at Norrsken until Norman Borlaug is as famous as Kim Kardashian. And we're nowhere near that. So we want to keep highlighting the success of impact entrepreneurs, the important work that they're doing, and do that in a fun, inspiring, and light way. Because sustainability and impact in general can often be a little bit heavy, and it can feel depressing when you look at the problems. So trying to inject a bit of light and really showcase the fantastic work that is being done and how exciting it can be to work with these kinds of organizations. So changing the narrative around impact entrepreneurship in society in general, that's our goal and what we're trying to do. And if partners can help out with that, it'd be fantastic to get in touch.
I actually remember a very good example, and that is the video you made, the trailer for the Impact Week in September last year. Where you're starting the film, and it almost feels like there's rock stars. We're looking for the next superheroes that are saving or solving the really big problems. And I think all of us at Catapult Cloud and anywhere should think about how are we actually making sure to encourage the people and give them a pat on the back when they're doing something, because there's not as many games in impact tech as there is in basketball or football or other arenas where you get to showcase yourself. There's always pitching rounds, but we need something more. We need them to sort of have an arena to stand for what they're doing. And I think taking that collective responsibility in being part of building those new superheroes is part of what we want to do as a global community of change makers, to make sure that we are also lifting each other's and the new rock stars, the entrepreneurs. And then, as you're saying, if people are listening now and they have ideas, or they're an entrepreneur, or they have other entrepreneurs that I think are within the Norrsken scope, or they have network or contacts in Rwanda to help you scale your impact globally, reach out. You can do that either in a direct message through the Hopin platform to either Harini or Erik, or you could probably also register an initiative at the Action Against Corona website. I also posted the link on the side here. So with that,
or just email us, Erik or Harini at Norrsken.org. Just reach out.
Very available people. That's great. We're all in this together in the same boat, even though we can't gather physically this year. I really want to thank you for taking your time and being part of this.
Thank you.
And I'll give a little practical update to the ones listening too. There will be a 2-hour break from the main stage. Before 3 p.m., we're going to the theme called Impact Investing in Times of COVID-19, where Liesel Pritzker-Simmons will have a conversation with Sam Bonsi, but there will be tons of sessions going on before that. And I look forward to seeing you around the platform. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.